Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. If you do not know my face, my name is Avril Williams. I am the head of marketing with Backyard ADUs. So all of you who follow us on social media and get our newsletter, that would be me. We're also joined by Tim O'Reilly. He's our Massachusetts Small Home Advisor. So if you're in Massachusetts and do end up getting one of these feasibility studies done, you'll be working directly with him. And then we also have Jeff Bowman. He's our main small home advisor. So all the main people out there, you'll be working with Jeff. Tonight, we're going to talk about feasibility studies. I do want to say before we get started that if you do follow us on Instagram or have Instagram, we are doing a feasibility study giveaway. So I think it ends next Tuesday. If you want to hop on and follow us on Instagram, you can get entered. Just click on the post that says giveaway and find out how to win one for free. And you guys can take it away.
Oh, cool. That's great. I didn't know we were doing that.
I love it.
Hopefully it's in Mass. Maybe it'll be in Maine.
Tim doesn't have Instagram, so he's out of the loop.
I'm in the dark. Well, thanks, Avril. Like Jeff and I were just saying, we're really looking forward to showing you guys tonight, sort of behind the curtain on these feasibility studies. These started originally, we were driving around and coming to people's properties for free, sort of all over Mass and Maine. And over time, they've evolved. So we have a full engineering and architect team that we integrate with our house designs. And that's the goal of this feasibility, is to sort of figure out up front what's possible on your property, what's going to work, and how can you go from whatever your situation is to having an ADU or a single family home. All right, let me share my screen and get started.
I also, we are answering questions live. So if you do have questions come up at any point, just throw them in that Q&A box. There should be a button at the bottom of your screen to put any questions in there. I've disabled the chat just so that we can not have to try and find questions amongst a lot of comments. But I will be using the chat possibly if there's some sort of resource that I need to drop in there that Tim or Jeff bring up that I think could be helpful. So you'll still be able to see anything that we send, but if you have any questions, put it in that Q&A.
Awesome. And that honestly, that makes tonight. Jeff and I do several of these a month, probably four to six, sometimes more. So we've learned a lot by doing these over the past 3 years or so. And we're so happy that you're here tonight. So please use that Q&A chat so we can be interactive here. But let me get started.
Definitely.
Share my screen. Where are we here? All right. So tonight we got a lot to cover in just an hour here. So I kind of want to do an overview, sort of what is this feasibility? How did we come up with it, and why do we do it? What's our process? We've broken it down into 3 simple steps. What do you get out of it? What are those deliverables? And then from there, what are next steps?
Great.
So Jeff, this is one that you did.
I noticed.
Yeah, tell us about this site.
Yeah, this is a site that we were just at last week. It is out in Pownell, Maine. And this is actually where they ended up putting their septic tank. If you guys remember, we were sitting back over in the far right corner. That's where we were watching the house get set. We just set the house last week. It's a beautiful, beautiful house. We're very excited about it. But we go from this piece of land, which they had cleared with their own site work team, which if you want to do that, you can do that. We have our site work team if you want to clear a piece of land, but they cleared out a clearing, they bought a piece of land and decided to put an ADU on there. So this was actually where their septic ended up going and standing where the house is now set.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of inputs to go from a piece of land, which you need to clear, add a septic and a lot of utilities when you're thinking about building, to turn it to something like this, whether it's a backyard ADU or a single family house. There's so many pieces think about in that construction phase. And I often, when I talk to people who are thinking about what might be possible, is there's sort of some analysis paralysis where there's so much to think about. Again, if you're looking at something like this, there's a lot to do and a lot of pieces to figure out to end up moving into a new spot. So we've seen this consistently. Everyone's situation and property is different. And our goal with this feasibility is to help you figure out at the outset, what are all the inputs that you need? What's the design? What's the budget? And how can we make that work? So this sort of came out of over several years as we've been around, is noticing there's a lot wrong with construction. So where does construction get it wrong? If you're looking at a piece of land like Jeff had up there in Pownell, you could bring contractors there, site work people, and there's a lot of hand waving saying, oh yeah, this is what you need to do. This is sort of how much it is. Often it's lacking in details. There's still a lot of unknowns. And you could ask 5 different people and get 5 different opinions. So we find people doing their due diligence. It's a pretty tricky process. And our feasibility study is our way of trying to help aid in that process. So you're getting a concrete estimate, a plethora of details. We're trying to eliminate unknowns, and we're trying to provide you with that fair professional opinion. This over here, I had to redact some information, but I was working with a lady a couple of years ago, and this is the estimate that she got for her new house. So there's some details in there. There's some pricing, but it's a bit all over the place. It's really unclear. What is the total cost? I see 150,000, 150 million, 300,000, total cost of foundation and site work, 150,000. There's a lot of details in here. I was sort of blown away when I saw this.
Yeah, this is crazy.
Yeah, and in going through here, there's no mention of windows and no mention of painting. So it left a lot to be desired by this woman of, hey, what actually is the cost to build this house on my lot?
Yeah, wow.
Cool. So in order to not end up getting pieces of paper like that, we've broken the feasibility down into 3 steps. And basically we do an analysis before we come on site. We do a site visit. Then we do our detailed engineering review. And those 3 things together allow us to produce the feasibility study and the map. So before the site visit, that's often starting with a client meeting. Jeff, what's a client meeting you've had recently?
Yeah, let's see. Gosh, so many. So typically a client meeting is going over somebody's where they're trying to build. Some folks, so I'm up here in Maine. Some folks have a piece of land that they're trying to build their ADU on. I get approached often as well with people having a piece of property out in maybe more rural northern Maine, looking to put a standalone home out there. Just kind of getting an idea of what the scope of the project is. Building in a backyard in Portland is different than building in 3 acres in Rockland, Maine. So just figuring out what the scope of what they're trying to build, who they're trying to build for is often a key asset. Are they trying to build first for their mother or their parents, or are they trying to add on rental capacity in some of these states, cities, rather? And who are they building for? And then that also leads into, how many beds, how many baths, if they had no limit on their budget, on their scope on their dream, what is it that they're trying to do? And so kind of take all of that and then digest that, run that through what is allowed in their municipality, in their city, in their state, in their city, and then also in their zoning district. Are ADUs allowed, or whatever it is they're trying to build? Is that allowed? What are the limiting factors? And then from there, that kind of narrows down generally in broad sense what we could, what a price point might be for them. So that's usually where my conversations end up going. And then if they want to pursue further, if they think that they can, if they want us to come out and do a site visit, then I'll come out and do the site visit. But I'll kind of go through each of these items here in a before site visit regard, in a conversation with them, and then with due diligence research as well.
Totally. And that's such a great point, Jeff, is often at this initial client meeting, before you've even signed up for a survey, Jeff and I are always doing at least definitely this local reviews, saying, hey, sure, give us your address. We're going to look up your town's rules, your zoning district, and see if something might be possible. And that way it would help inform in that initial client meeting, hey, what are your visions and goals? Is it possible in your town? And again, sort of the elephant in the room is budget, is how are we going to make this thing work? And from there, we can dive in GIS mapping, more detailed zoning and mapping research. Are there any overlay districts or specific town requirements in your municipality? So permitting, just a quick sort of overview. There's sort of two pathways when it comes to ADUs and their regulations. So is it by right? Are we going to go directly to the building department? As long as we check all the boxes and follow the rules, can we get our permit and build? Or are we required to do a special permit, jump through some extra hoops, have planning board hearings and or zoning board hearings, where you can get input from the neighbors? It does require additional paperwork and time. So there's some uncertainty there. And it's a lot more just like rubber stamping. But either way, oh, go ahead, Jeff.
I was going to say, I feel in Maine and Massachusetts that they can differ a little bit. When you're working with a client and you're getting into the feasibility phase, or you've worked in a lot of towns now, Tim, down in Massachusetts, do you feel that there is a move toward more towns doing this by right permitted use, or do you still feel like you have to go through a special permitting process often or frequently?
Yeah, it's really a case by case basis, and more so geographically. Towns, I'm trying to think, a lot on the South Shore in and around Boston are often the special permit route, where the towns want extra control and oversight. But as we all know, with this housing crisis that we're facing, towns are moving to change from special permit to by right, to streamline this process, take out some of that uncertainty, and make ADUs more possible.
Yeah, that's great. I find my experience up here I have more by right when I'm dealing with municipalities. I have more by right and permitted use. There are exceptions to that, kind of in the south of Portland area that come to mind specifically, that I need to get a special permit or town hearings, or they just still don't allow it, even though there's that state law that got passed that's going to go into effect July of 24, that mandates that on the state level every municipality allow an ADU. But I was just curious. I feel like in Massachusetts, you end up doing more of these public hearings and special permits than up here in Maine.
Yeah, and the rules are changing quick.
Yeah.
Even from a year or two ago, towns that used to require special permits are changing things, either to by right or just in general changing their ADU rules, as they realize there's some rules that can be big roadblocks to building an ADU. So either way, Jeff or I, we're looking at a lot of bylaws, sort of downloading that geographic map with rules. So it's an important thing to keep your mind on. So within that realm of permitting, there can be some snares to navigate. Depending on your town, there may be overlay districts. From those of you guys that were at the Cape Cod virtual event, you might recognize this picture. I stole it from that PowerPoint. This is, for example, in Falmouth, These are a couple of the many overlay districts in that town. So not only do you have to find this map and know whether you're in the zone or not, but you have to comb through the bylaw, find that overlay district and any associated rules, because that is going to apply to your property and your build. So there are some hazards out there. It's not to say you can't find it, but keep that in mind of overlay districts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like the most often overlay district here in Maine is the shoreland overlay district.
What do they require for that one?
That one is just being set back from the water, usually about either 75 feet or 250 feet, depends on where you're trying to build. But generally, you know, there's a lot of, I see the geographical, there's a lot of fingers there in Falmouth, it looks like, of land and water. And it's usually in places that are trying to protect the waterways is really what it ends up being. But you know, Harpswell comes to mind, or Phippsburg, or places like that where there's a lot of shoreland to be had compared to actual land.
Neat. Yeah, same in Cape Cod and a lot of the areas we have here.
Yeah.
Let's keep that in mind. All right. So once we do that initial background research, meet with you and start to know your property better, we'll schedule a site visit. So Jeff, it looks like this is one that you did.
Yeah.
You want to walk us through it?
Yeah, this was Tuesday afternoon for me. Was going through and taking measurements. So when we performed the site visit, we like to meet you on site if at all possible. If you as a customer are around, just kind of recap on what the project is that you're trying to do. Usually it's a first time face to face, so that's just nice to put a name to the face, and just kind of see the land, look at it through your eyes, and get a good understanding of what it is that you're attempting to do. These folks are trying to put an ADU on their house. Their house was built in the 1800s, and in order to bypass a sprinkler law, the city mandates that any new building needs a sprinkler unless it is attached to the existing building. So they're looking to bypass that and actually attach the ADU to their existing home here, which would require cutting down this big, beautiful tree that is in the middle photo there. But these are just some site photos I took of, you know, quickly. They're just internal photos that you guys are getting a behind the scenes on. But you can see my transit there on the ground, or my tape rather, that I was using to take transit measurements on. Transit is it's a laser beam that we're able to take topographical data points off of, so that way we can map out if there is a grade change in the elevation. So yeah, we perform the site visit, take a bunch of measurements, a bunch of photos. Usually we like to take a peek in your basement if you're trying to do an ADU, so we can see if we can use any of the existing utilities and piggyback those rather than cutting new utilities into the municipality, or adding onto your septic if you're out further out. But these were just some photos that show what we're doing when we're out there performing the site visit.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out we can do only so much from the computer. Google Earth, Google Street View, your town's mapping data, but getting out there and getting into the field is where we can really see a lot of the details. Like I'm noticing the foundation reveal, you know, where are those septic or sewer pipes, you know, the tree in GIS, but now go in there and saying, okay, that's a pretty big tree. We'll be better able to price out, hey, how much is it going to cost to take out that tree, to take out that stump, and then you know, attached to the house as well. Yeah,
that tree was 11 feet around.
Really? Wow. Yeah. So Jeff mentioned, you know, an important part of that study is coming and checking out the utilities. What's on site? What's your water, sewer, or septic and electrical situation? So I compiled some photos here of various things I've seen. But typically when I'm looking at sewers or septics, like Jeff said, we're trying to grab some grade differential, shoot some basic topography data to know where is that tank in the ground, where are our pipes now, and where might new pipes be, because the goal is to be gravity fed. If you do need a pump, that's a line item that can be $5 to $6 grand. And then, down the line, you have to pay for all the electricity for that pump. And if the pump fails, there's some maintenance with it. So we're trying to get that up front. So, again, how much is my whole project going to cost? If you have to do something like a pump, we're trying to figure that out at this early stage so we can get ahead of it. We're grabbing data, what's in the ground, how many bedrooms are in the house, how many can be supported, how old's the system, and are there any nitrogen requirements? Because those systems can get pricey and you're going to want to know that up front. If we're on public sewer, again, the grade is important for gravity feed. But what are those lines in your house? I got a photo next that I'll show you. And then what are any local rules? Each town is going to have rules about how they want to treat ADUs. Can we connect inside the existing basement? Do we have to go around the house? Are there any fees associated with adding more living space? So these are all things where, again, we're trying to download that data so we can get you accurate pricing for your project.
Yeah. I think I had slipped this one in between what you had already had there, Tim. These were just some photos of the septic systems that I have seen up here in Maine. On the left photo there, that is an Elgin system that we're putting in, and then in the bottom right photo, that's it at a further distance, and you can see that we're prepping the site for foundation. They actually built that foundation later in that day. So you can see that the septic system is nice and downhill. We try to always put a septic system downhill from where we're going to be building to avoid that pump cost. Things like to go downhill, and it's best not to have to put a pump in unless the site really demands it. So even at this site, we had to bring in quite a bit of fill to level off the site, which still allowed a good natural drop to that septic system down there. And then in the top right photo, there was it's hard to see, but there's a large mound in the background, and that was a previous septic system that had been put in about 10 years ago. And that was all. I tried to find a better photo. That was the only photo I got of it, but it was probably 4 feet high off the ground, and had 4 bedrooms already on it. So it didn't have much capacity for these people wanted to put a 3-bedroom ADU in their yard. And so all that to say, we are planning on putting a brand new septic system in addition, which will be much smaller. I like these Elgin systems that you see in the other photo, but we'll put another septic system in for them. So we take into a lot of factors of where would be best, if we can already reuse what is existing infrastructure, or add to some newer septic systems you can add to, or do we need to replace entirely?
Yeah, and I've seen a couple systems here in Mass where the more loads of filled I got a truck in, that's what can really jack the cost up. So it's good to get your eyes on that earlier.
Yeah.
Cool. And then, do they have to do any tree clearing here to put this system in?
They did some tree clearing. The customer has like 10 acres where he's putting this, so he was not too concerned with saving. He would rather the site work team, as he said, clear out the trees that need to be cleared rather than saving a tree and having it end up falling on the house or whatever. So they did end up clearing out a little bit of trees back there and where the site was, but it was a fairly natural area to be putting both the septic and the house. They were both rather clear as it was.
Great. This is one.
Sorry, Tim. Reminder to everyone to put questions in the Q&A too, and we'll make sure that they get answered. If you have a question, just hit that Q&A button at the bottom, and we won't end without answering your question. Just reminding everyone.
And, while we're talking about septics, there's no crappy question. So, don't be embarrassed. Put your questions in the Q&A.
Isn't here either.
This is one basement I saw recently. So it's a little bit hard to tell, but this PVC pipe that we see up here is 3 inches, and it's going into a 4-inch pipe that's going out to that septic. So in this case, they had already maxed out the number of bathrooms that they could have on a 3-inch pipe. So I couldn't come into the basement and connect to these existing pipes. I need to connect to a 4-inch. So in this case, even just popping in the basement, I knew, okay, when I'm outside thinking about the ADU and where's it going to go, I'm either going to have to come into the basement here to connect to 4-inch or go around and outside.
Mm-hmm.
On the left, this is one I saw recently. I pulled into the driveway and I said, okay, I know where I'm going to start. And I ran out to the yard and I was like, all right, well, here's their leach field. This is the end of it where they have a vent pipe. And obviously you can tell, I'm downhill and away from the house. So it's no surprise to me that the septic pipe is leaving this corner of the basement. Their tank is somewhere here, and then it's coming under the driveway and leaching. So I knew now that I was on site, or wherever I was going to be thinking about putting an ADU, how might I be able to connect to that tank and use the leach field. I still needed to go grab the records from the town and get some more information, but at least on site, I could start to triangulate that and figure out what's going to work and what might not work. Speaking of town, this is another one I did, and I reached out to the Board of Health. So if you're ever unsure of your own septic records, reach out to your local Board of Health and ask for anything and everything that they have on file. So this is one that I got. Let's see, can I zoom in on this here? Yes, I can't. But it's telling me how big is their tank, what kind of leaching system do they have, and generally where is it in the backyard. So again, I need to do a site visit to figure out what's going on site, and this is pretty old. So what's changed in terms of trees and all that. But this got me started to say, where are these things and how might we be able to make this work? Or Jeff, like in your case, do a new system.
Mm-hmm. This makes me think of a case we have out in Harpswell. It's actually on Bailey Island, and I have Kevin doing some sleuthing right now behind the scenes, and we are trying to figure out. We had a handwritten note from somebody at some point in time saying where they thought the septic was, a previous property owner. And that was the only documentation that we have of the septic on the site. So right now, we are doing our due diligence to figure out where it actually is, if it even exists, if what we might need to do in order to build, because we have to make sure that we have this septic in line before we go through and build very early stages. But all that to say, sometimes the town doesn't have official records. I've found, at least up here in Maine, some municipalities are still putting their stuff together. But it doesn't hurt to ask.
Yeah, you got to ask that. We got to know what the town knows and what's out there. In Mass, Title V came in existence right around 2000 or the late 1990s. And so all projects we're doing now, we need Title V compliance and or documentation. So hopefully your town has that. In this case, this was from the 1980s, I believe. So even if we tried to connect to this system, we were going to have to do a perk test and bring this up to Title V compliance. So I put that in my report and said, hey, we're going to have to spend a couple $1,000s here to make sure that we can use this system, or worst case scenario, do a whole new system. All right.
Tim, we do have a question, and it's kind of, I think we're going into it, so maybe it's something you'll cover. Looking to build a standalone in the North Shore Peabody area. What determines if you can connect to city water and or electricity?
Yeah, we'll talk on electricity in a bit. And your town is going to have their own rules of what they want to see, specifically the DPW. So ADUs are so new. Your town may not yet have those ADU specific rules. But for connecting to public water, we'll look at a couple of photos in a minute. We're typically connecting inside, the existing basement behind the meter. So we'll want to look and see, what's there, what's your pipe, what's the size, to hopefully figure out if you're going to have any water pressure issues. But yeah.
So it's usually the size of the pipe. Like
Both.
what is determining that? The size or
Both. There's different materials and then different sizes. And it's not only the size of the pipe, but the size of the meter. Often the meter size is smaller than the pipe. So even if you have a big enough aperture in your inlet pipe, you may need to upgrade your meter to allow more water to flow through to get the water and pressure you need. But it also depends on what's your current usage and how big's the ADU and how much is getting connected to it. So
how close is the ADU to the house, and all kinds of factors.
Yeah, there's a lot of nuance to it. But typically it will be possible. We'll just need to investigate exactly what's there. But if you're not on public water, you're on a well. So it's often fun. Part of the site visit is to be figuring out, hey, where the heck is that well? This is one, I believe it's up on Cape Cod, where I did a lot of walking around to try and find the well. Like your septic up in Maine, Jeff, I had one note on one plan from an old town record that said the well was in a certain location. This person she's one of our clients. I went back with a metal detector to try to find it. I couldn't find it. And our surveyor, who's a total pro, he ended up finding it. But wells can be a little tricky. Hopefully there's good records. But what you're really looking for is trying to figure out what's our refill rate, just so we know, hey, if we're adding more bathroom fixtures, plumbing fixtures, can that well support it? But similar to public water, there's a lot of nuance there. But
yeah, if you can find the well cap, and anybody out there who has a well, if you're curious and you don't know exactly what your well can do, you can usually take a wrench out there, undo some screws, and look at the bottom of that well cap, and it will have data. It might look a little torn and worn, like what you see in this bottom right corner here, but there is information in there that might be pertinent for you. So
hopefully this will help answer that public water question. Here's a couple insides of basements. On the left here on the bottom, you see that blue pipe coming in. So that's a PEX pipe. It then transitions to copper. So what we're often looking at is what is the size and material of the pipe entering the basement. And then on the right here, we see, hey, this is the size coming into the meter. There's the meter. So what's the size at that meter? And then what is our size and material after the meter? A lot of nuances, but generally, if it's bigger than 3/4 inch copper, you can use it. And if our ADU is sort of less than 100 feet away, hopefully we're not going to have any water pressure issues. But then again, sound like beating a dead horse here, but your DPW is ultimately going to be that authority that determines how and what material we can connect to that ADU. Can you use just the existing meter and share a water bill? Do you need a second meter for the ADU? Can we connect in the basement? Do we have to connect around in the yard? All towns and DPWs have different rules.
Yeah.
And fees. I should note that as well. Recently, I've been seeing to add an ADU in certain towns, it's $4 or $5 grand. So that's something we're trying to capture now at the feasibility level and put into that budget. So again, you have accurate information of the total project cost. All right, the electrical. So this is often not governed by your municipality. There's a couple municipalities here in Mass that have their own electrical, but often, it's a third party. So here it's Eversource, our national grid. And what's it up there, Jeff?
Central Main Power, CMP. Unless you live in Kennebunk or a few other random towns have their own thing, but by far and large, it's CMP, Central Main Power.
Awesome. Yeah. So these companies, they're going to have their rules and specifications of how they want to see an ADU hooked up. But typically on our end, designing and building them, we're going to want 200 amps for that ADU, just because we're doing all electric. So we got to heat the hot water with electricity, heat and cool with mini splits, which is electric. And then we have, appliances and lights and everything else. So that's what we're aiming for. Sometimes though, you can connect to the existing house depending on what's there and run a sub panel. But if you have big load items like a pool, a hot tub, you're heating your house with heat pumps. Oftentimes it is best to separate these so that you're not going to have any issues. And that's typically in the form of a second service. So if you're a standalone house, you have your own service, and we'll request a secondary service. So you have a new meter, a new account, and that's serving just the ADU.
That meter can either go next to the existing meter on the primary house, or it can go right onto the ADU, or I've seen it go right on the electrical pole itself that runs to the ADU. So those are all things we factor in what would be the best for the situation, both cost wise as well as just what would be the most ideal thing if you want your sight lines, if you don't want overhead, if you all kinds of things.
Yeah, in Mass, I don't think we're allowed to mount on the poles anymore, but sometimes you see these sort of meter stops over here. So this one's sort of close to the street, close to the pole, but so they just bring the meter up. So this is an underground service. What we're looking at with these is typically, where is it? But also what is it? So what's the conduit size? So if we're trying to run that 200 amp cable, it's a big, thick cable. If you have a big enough conduit, we can share that conduit that's already there. So you don't have to do any new digging. But again, there's certain rules for how big the conduit needs to be to run certain size lines. So that's what we're looking for. It's also, again, if you're underground, where are these, where's the infrastructure? So is there a transformer? Are we coming off a pole? How far away are these? That wire itself that I was talking about these days is about $20 per foot. So if we're going underground, it can start to add up quickly if we're doing really long runs. So we're trying to get our eyes on this stuff on site and figure out what's there. So again, we can, know what's it going to cost to get it all hooked up. If you're overhead, like in the right, we often can do, they call it like a mid-span connection. So if there's no pole, we can connect in that span. But like we see here in this case, this is across the street. So there's only a certain distance you can go away. Typically like 120 to 150 feet is pushing it, about how far away they'll run an overhead line. And would we need to set a new pole? There can be cost implications there. Or are there any trees or obstacles in the way? So these are all things we're trying to get our eyes on and download.
I've run into circumstances where an overhead pole was right in the right place, but it had too many. It was being overused. The pole itself didn't have capacity for putting on anything more on there, so we ended up having to put a mid-span pole in and do it that way.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Jeff. Is even though if all these things are there, the transformer's nearby or the pole is there, we still have to go through the verification process with the engineer for the power company, because they're going to have access to the data of can you get what you want from that location. The power company's sort of always a thorn in our side. It's a black hole of bureaucracy. But this is what we're able to gather at that feasibility level to, again, sort of try to eliminate some uncertainties to know that the new ADU can get power.
Or at least point out that this might be an issue, this might be an issue moving forward. but we need to delve deeper into the topic to really know.
Yeah, this one on the left, this is one I did out in Harwich. So there was their nearest pole at the street. And if we wanted to build in their backyard, we were going to have to go about 120 feet to the backyard. We're going to have to dig up that driveway. We're going to certainly impact the planters here. And then depending on how things go with that fence, if we needed to take any sections of fence down. So I needed to give them a heads up. Hey, not only are we far away, that wire is expensive, but we're going to cut through the driveway. And depending on how you want to repair that, we want to get ahead of that expectation and that cost. But that's the way to get power back to the site. Cool. Any questions on utilities?
Can you add solar to the ADU?
Definitely. Yeah, Jeff, have you done one of those recently?
Yeah. We typically during the design phase, usually when we come out and do the site visit, we'll figure out, we take that into account when we're deciding with you where you would like to put your ADU. And typically I found most plots of land, we're able to find a way to put an ADU somewhere where we can get that solar gain. Even if it's, hey, you need to cut down this tree and this tree in order to get that. Most plots of land, you can get that solar gain. What you want is a south-facing roof structure, or at least what we do a lot up here in Maine as well is we'll put a carport in. So somewhere that you can park your car underneath that's just kind of open air. And you can, if you can't orient your house to have a good south-facing face, you can orient that carport in order to get that solar gain. And then you can put solar panels on that to then make your house net zero. We love doing that. So.
Yeah, and if you're down here in Massachusetts, we were required to do a like energy report and analysis. So we do a preliminary one when we're designing the home, which tells you exactly how much energy you're going to use. And the solar company takes that and designs the system and say, okay, we're going to design a system to meet your needs. And then obviously designing the roof, making sure you have the square footage you need for a solar system. That's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
So the third part, the last step, in order to help us generate this feasibility, we do all the background research we can from the computer, we do the site visit, and then we download that into our team. So we have our engineering team look over all our photos and our research and our report. Our architect does a review as well, make sure, hey, are we designing the right house to fit the space? And all of this gets punched in on the back end of pricing so that we can actually give you detailed pricing on what is known and what is unknown. And again, to give you some specifics. So
circling back to where we were, sorry. We were talking about solar and the question is, what about adding a vehicle charger to the ADU too?
Yep. Yeah, it's totally possible. Again, in that energy analysis, if you're in Mass and we're doing that, we would punch that in, and then that way they would design that solar system. We're not the solar company. You would need to work with an independent solar company, but we would, we'd bring them into that design process to get that feedback.
And up here in Maine, we take a lot of those. We take cues off of how they do it down there, and we would figure out how much you would need to have, what you think your expected energy use would be, and what that car charger would be, and then we factor into that, and then we work with you with the solar company to input that solar panel on your property.
Yep. And then when we're building the house, we're going to have all the right wires run so that car charger can get hooked up.
Mm-hmm. Solar chases in the right area, all of that. Yeah.
Cool. All right. So yeah, we bring our whole team in. And then the best part is getting out the deliverables. So there's sort of three parts to that too. The big one's the site sketch. I always joke it's like a bootleg survey. So instead of paying a surveyor a couple $1,000s to go get that plot plan from the outset, we're trying to get ahead of that now and identify, what is on site, what are your setbacks? In this case, she had a shed on her site that needed to get moved. So we showed her shed setbacks, where she could move that to. We tried to gather plant data on site, like where are trees and bushes and what might need to be removed. Access. So, her driveway, do you need to expand your driveway and add additional parking? How are we going to have access to the site for machines and trailers and cranes? So where's our construction access? I took this was one I did, some transect data of where is the septic in the yard? What are the elevations there? Can we have gravity feed to that system? Where's our water line? Where's our electrical service? So all this stuff we're gathering in the field, we're compiling into the site sketch, which our goal is to be pretty darn close, so that up front, hey, is this possible or not possible, and not spending a couple grand on a surveyor without knowing that.
We'll take this document, and this will be our we'll update it as we move further, but this is the feasibility study in general, including the site sketch, are the master document that then we take you as the client through the entire process of building. So we take this very seriously with the quotes that we give you, with the all of the time and energy that we put into this. It's as much a tool for you, the consumer, as it is for us to know what it is that we're dealing with on each project. So it ends up being our master document through your whole time with us, which I think is just worth stating.
Yeah, and a lot of the value here too is having something on paper, because even if there are still unknowns after this, you have something showing what you're proposing, what you're thinking about. And so if there are other questions or follow-up items, it's easy to send this to someone, or go to the town and talk to them about it. Recently I had someone building near a wetland, and I said, hey, before you give us any more money to move this forward, you need to get ahead of this wetland thing. But here, it's on the site sketch. You can go and talk to them and say, hey, here's where I'm thinking of putting this ADU. Here's the wetlands. What are my next step? And they went and gathered that information, to, again, sort of eliminate some uncertainty before moving forward. So having the physical map is super helpful.
We also have another question of, would you need a police detail if you have a crane coming in? I know that some cities are picky, and is that added into the price? I know we haven't talked much about the crane stuff, but that's included in the feasibility study too, right?
Yeah, we're thinking about how are we going to get the crane in there? How are we going to get the house parts in there? And then the actual logistics of getting a police detail to escort the house parts. We take care of all that, along with the crane, if any police details are needed for that. But typically the crane, they have all the right permits to go down the road and they can show up on their own. But if we're doing an oversized load or anything like that and need police escorts or details on site, yeah, it's all included. But yeah, that's such a good point is, if you're a builder, like that thing we looked at the beginning, didn't include $1,500 for the police detail, you're going to end up paying for that. You just didn't know about it when you started. So it's a good point.
Yeah, as if it's not explicitly covered in the feasibility study, it's a factor that we take into account, especially based on where it is that you're trying to build, what your municipality is, and also the size of what you're trying to build. So if there's not a specific line item in there, it has already been factored in at this feasibility report, and we'd be happy to talk with you about how we got the numbers that we got in the feasibility report.
Yeah, so let's look at that report. I pulled one up here that I was working on recently.
Great.
So this is one I delivered to the homeowner after my site visit and then our back of the house engineering architectural review. So we looked at all the permits. What did they need? In this case, they needed conservation permission before approaching the ZBA. So that was an important one for them to know. This was all the stuff about their lot. We went over their specific ADU requirements. What's all in there? What do you need to abide by? and also what are some cost implications and how might that affect the price. Electrical, hey, what's there currently? What do we recommend? Are there any notes or follow-up activities that we need to do? Same with the sewer and the water. So what's on site and what are our recommendations on the best way to move forward? What is going on site? Are there any grades we need to think about? Are things on site that are considerations that are going to impact the project? And then any notes on site work, and then obviously cost implications. So we're going through all these various detailed parts of the project to get you that granular information about what's possible. And more to answer this question with logistics in the crane. What's in the crane's way? What are some of our lengths on size? Do we have any trailer length restrictions? And what might we need to do to get the crane in there? Also sometimes throw in some helpful financing links if we think those will be applicable to you and your project.
Great.
Cool. All right. So, and the best part, I think, honestly, is you get the site sketch and you get the report, but you get the chance to debrief. So Jeff and I, or no, the debrief's coming, but the best part might be the budget. So this is a different project. This is the detailed breakdown of everything that's going on. So the middle column here is what we expect typically for the size of ADU, bedrooms, bathrooms, of a standard ADU on a flat lot with utilities nearby. And I'm showing them, hey, what are all the additional things on your site that have cost implications? And then a couple little notes. So in their case, as we see in under utility connections, they needed a new septic. So I'm trying to set that expectation. Hey, expect $20,000 for a new septic. Your utility lines are also really far away. So we're factoring that in now. Because again, we're pricing out that whole project. So it's all in there. We're looking at modular, what's built in the factory, what's all coming, what are we needing to do to finish it on site, inside and outside, what are all our costs up front in the pre-construction process to get that done, and then what are the costs in construction along with town permitting. So we include all that in, and we're trying to show you, hey, what can you expect to be typical, but also on your specific lot. And I use this example because of that septic. That's a good one to note. And they also had, let's see, they had a big sloping site. So similar to that one you were looking at earlier, Jeff, where, hey, you had a septic, you needed to bring in some fill, there was some grade to worry about. We're trying to gather that information and get you specific data. We also put in at the end, if they want to do a DIY shell and cut out, a lot of our construction management and manage it themselves, what they should expect to pay to get that design process and that house designed.
Yeah. This makes me think of one thing I always like to tell people, and especially even during that pre-site visit, the very first topic that we talked about, is that when we give you one of these feasibility studies, it is a total project cost rather than just the house components. So this is what it would cost to do the entire project from the time that we're talking now to the point where you're getting your certificate of occupancy and you're moving your boxes in. So, like we laid out in this whole presentation, everything is included in that. That being said, too, if you have up here in Maine, at the very least, we have a lot of folks that have, they have a neighbor or somebody who likes to do site work, or they have connections. So at the very least, you can take what we think the project cost will be and use it as a quote to then go around and bid some of that off to other folks. So it's a total project view of what it would cost to put an ADU or a standalone or whatever it is you're trying to build on your piece of land, rather than just the house components. So.
And we did have a finance question. Can you use the money from a home equity loan for an ADU?
Yep. Yeah, that's a great way to fund one of these. is get that ELOC, and then use that to build your ADU.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, I guess the last thing just to add is we typically, the thing we're not including is appliances. So tell people factor in, a couple $1,000s for appliances, but that's the only thing that wouldn't be in here. And our goal, and again, going through all these specific things, is to be really darn close. But I do tell people, think that we're in, 5%, maybe 10%. We're obviously going to dive into the design phase next and really pick all the finishes and do the design. So some of these numbers might change a little bit, but we're trying to, shoot and hit the bullseye so you know exactly what it's going to be. All right. So you get the report, you get the map, you get the detailed pricing. But Jeff, this is what I was going to say. I think the best part is the follow-up. We had that initial conversation. We say, hey, we're going to do some background research, get back to you on what might be possible. And what I love about doing these feasibilities is the mystery of it, trying to solve all this stuff, but getting to know people and also help them on their journey to figure out what might be possible. I think for however many of these we do, we don't build for everyone, but people use them as a tool. And that is really validating to know that we're providing this document that can help you figure out what might be possible.
Yeah, I think some people think that by having us do their feasibility study that they're potentially contracted to build with us. So I think it's a good point that people can use this for anything that they'd like.
Yeah, and that's our goal. So we charge $600 for this, and that basically just covers our time, like you saw tonight, to do all this labor. But that's ultimately the goal, is to have a low barrier to entry, to know, hey, I'm here researching small homes, researching ADUs, or my mom needs a place to stay, is sort of for that low sticker price. You're going to get a lot of information that you could go off. You could pay an architect 10 grand to design a house, but that still doesn't get you all that detailed information and budgets. So
good question too. How long does the study process typically take?
Yeah, I think on my end, I'm typically scheduling the site visit 2 weeks out. That allows our team to do all that background research. And then I like to tell people it typically takes me about a week and a half to compile the initial report. And then it goes through our tiered review process. So that typically takes 2 to 3 weeks. So people that schedule a feasibility, today, expect to see it in about a month, all in all. 2 weeks for the site visit, 2 weeks after to get your report.
Yeah, it's I found that there's a little bit of seasonality to it, or maybe things just ebb and flow a bit. But I think I'm about a month out for scheduling these feasibility studies. I have at least 2 every week for the next 4 to 6 weeks. So we're busy doing these feasibility reports and studies, and then it's another, once we do the site visit, it's usually about 2 weeks after that to get the actual report and then present our findings to you. I like to send it in an email beforehand, let you accumulate some questions about the report, and then schedule a time to go over the report and present our findings to you and answer any questions that you have at that point.
And then
these don't really expire. So you get people at all different stages of thinking about an ADU. But really, unless your local ADU bylaws change, which again, a lot of them are changing, but so we're seeing new bylaws and new things are possible. But people that have done a feasibility study a year ago, 2 years ago, come back to us and say, hey, now I'm ready to go. But all along they had that report and they knew, hey, roughly where are things going to be and what's possible on my lot. So, I'd also say along that lines is I've talked to so many people who are just at that initial gathering information stage, and Jeff and I love, talking to people, doing that initial swipe of saying, hey, might this be possible? And pointing people right in the right direction. Even if you're like, yeah, I'm not ready to do a feasibility, $600 is a chunk of change, but still shoot us an email. Happy to do that zoning review and see what's possible.
And people are wondering if they were to book their feasibility study today, about how long from start to finish until you see the finished product, move-in day? How long?
So the way that I tell people is, up here in Maine at least, is that when we schedule the feasibility study, from 2 weeks from that site visit, you'll have the report. We'll present it to you. If you're ready to go and you like what you see, we can hop right into design phase, get that scheduled within a matter of weeks, and kick that off. And so in the total project scheme, there's the feasibility study, there's a design phase, and then there's construction phase. And at the end of that construction phase, you're moving in. At the start of the design phase to the point where you're moving in, I typically say is 8 to 12 months up here in Maine. Things are different down in Massachusetts. I'm not sure exactly what that timing is, but I base things off of that design phase rather than the feasibility, because sometimes folks sit on a feasibility study for a year or two, and so that just throws the timeline off. But once you're committed, once you see what you have and you're ready to sign up, we start that design phase, where we'll design the home with you. And that is typically 8 to 12 months. We've done it in this photo here. We did it in 6 months for these nice folks down there. But I'd say that's maybe more the exception than the rule.
Yeah, I'd say it's typically about a year. With some of those unknowns, do you need to do a special permit? There's a lot of extra paperwork we need to do. The design phase might take a month. It might take 3 months. So there are some variables in there, but typically about a year. And then, like Jeff was saying, if you want to expedite that, we could look into streamlining that design process. All right, I know we're a little bit after 7 here. I was hoping to do some live, initial feasibility work. Are there any more questions we should answer? Maybe I want to thank everyone. If you have to hop off right at an hour here, but if you want to stick around, let's do that. Do you have an extra 5 or 10 minutes, Jeff?
I do.
Okay.
I'm cutting it close for time, but I can do another 5 minutes or so.
All right, let's do it. So why don't you go ahead and if anyone wants to, let's see, I have one volunteer here of a property in Harwich. So Harwich, Mass, GIS. So I'm going to start. They reached out to me and said, "Hey, Tim, I'm thinking about an ADU and what might be possible here in Harwich." So I'm going to first go and search the maps here. So this is the town maps. So this is, here we go. This is the platform that Harwich hires to have all their, GIS data. So
I love when there's GIS data. Sometimes up here in Maine, there are just towns where they just have photos of pieces of paper that they have online, and that's it. No GIS at all. GIS is great when you have it.
All right, so I think I'm messing this up here. I'll get my address. Oh, it's 25. All right. So this person reached out and said, "Hey, I live at 25 Smith Street." So I'm going to go see what's on the town. What's on the town? While that's loading, let's also look it up here.
We're also getting more questions.
Cool.
How energy efficient? Is it possible to be off CMP with solar and power wall and heat pump with wood stove backup?
Jeff, you want to take that one as a CMP expert?
Yep. Say that one more time for me, April.
How energy efficient? Is it possible to be off CMP with solar and power wall and heat pump with a wood stove backup? So we 100%. Always do heat pumps, correct?
Yep, we always do heat pumps. You can have a wood stove put in there if you'd like. We'd work with you on what the best way to do that would be. And if you wanted to put solar on there, it's just a matter of how much capacity you think you're going to have in order to be net zero. So typically our homes, let's say an 800 square foot home, would require a 7 to 10 kilowatt system. If you wanted to have a car charger and electric car, all of that, you would just add more capacity, which is really just adding more solar panels. So, so yeah,
And
yeah.
you
I
need a
mean,
really
it's
big,
possible.
you need a huge battery system. So the cost of that battery system to run those heat pumps, you start getting into the trade-off of you're going to spend $20,000 on batteries or bite the bullet and connect. And then if you want to do a wood stove, we're typically not doing that at the initial build, but we could design for it and then you could add it in after.
Yep, exactly. Well said.
All right, well, let's do a quick cruise here. So wherever you are in your town, go Google your town's GIS maps, look for your property, and hopefully they have something like this, layers, or we can start to pull in some data. So there's oftentimes some basic contour data. Hopefully there's some documents and links. So what's your property card? Should have a bunch of information on there. Your zoning district, your assessment data, your footprint, things like that. But what we're looking here is, okay, contours is good. Yeah, are there any wetlands? Trying to add this stuff in. I'll typically try to add a bunch of stuff. And this isn't the best example. They don't have all the layers we want to see. They're not showing me water lines in the street or fire hydrants or anything like that. But I'm starting to get a sense that, there's some sort of depression here. There's the main house. There's an outbuilding near the street, probably a garage. But let's go look at it on Google Maps. So, okay, it is a garage. Let's take a look at the street here. So it looks like there's overhead power. It's on the other side of the street. We were looking at that contour data. And so, yeah, it seems like there's some sort of depression here. So that might be an example. What are we doing with fill and site work? There's also some trees to be considered here. If we look around, depending on where this homeowner might want to build, looks like there's already some sort of secondary access to the property. So that's good, like a crane. If we take a couple sections of the fence down, can get in here. We want to make sure they can, turn off the road, but also those trailers, those house parts. Can you get a 70 or 60 or 50-foot trailer down here? Let's take a look as well. So where are other things? Utilities. Electric was across the street. In this case, for this homeowner, I would go to the being on Cape Cod, they're probably on septic. So I'd reach out to the Board of Health and say, hey, this is the property address. Can you send me all the records you have? And then, I don't know if they're on town water. Unfortunately, don't have that layer in here, but that would be one I'd ask the homeowner. They're going to know. So I can get some of that information here from the office, but it's not until, we go there and actually see what's happening to plug that in. But I'll also go into the zoning bylaw and say, hey, what are your setbacks? What's your required frontage? To try to figure out where might an ADU be possible here. The other thing I'm seeing, just shooting from the hip here, is this is their lot, but there's also this lot here next door, which may be owned by the neighbor, but it may also be owned by them. And if it is, in this case, if this is a buildable lot, it meets the frontage and lot size requirements, they may want to build on this lot, and it would be considered a single family home, which would be some easier financing routes. They could go to the bank and say, hey, I'm doing this as a single family home on its own lot, and get more of a conventional construction loan versus something like a HELOC we talked about earlier. If they built it on this existing lot.
Yeah, if that was their lot and they could subdivide that future, they could sell that. We could build it as an ADU on their lot. There's room to build that as an ADU, but then they could also sell that as a whole thing on its own. If that was something they wanted to do, we would factor that in terms of utility connections and making sure that it's its own standalone home.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. Ultimately, like, what's the value there? Both the same structure as an ADU or on its own lot. Cool. So we're really running out of time. I was hoping to close the bylaw and show you guys the rules in Harwich, but ADUs are possible there. But I would need to go do a site visit here to be able to compile that report, put it all in the site sketch, get the engineer and architect's eyes on it, and then do that accurate budget.
Yep.
Any final questions, April?
I think you got some specific questions here, Tim, from Slava. You got one that was saying that you had spoke over email with her, and that can you send this for Section 8 or government rental, or is there requirements?
Yeah, I'm not an expert on Section 8, but we would want to talk more about who's this being built for, and how so. Certain towns have grant programs. So if you're building an ADU and you're going to have it be affordable housing, there's grants available. But again, it's very town dependent. So I'm doing some background research for them. And thanks for coming tonight. I'll reach out.
Great.
But yeah, if you're thinking about an ADU for whatever reason, you want Jeff or I to get your eyes on it. Jeff's up in Maine. I'm here in Mass. Jeff, you're also doing part of New Hampshire.
Yep.
And I've done a little bit of Rhode Island, and dabbled a bit in Vermont as well. So we're slowly looking at most of New England here. Actually I got some inquiries from Connecticut as well. So that's Jeff's email and that's my email. Please don't hesitate to reach out. Don't be shy.
I just realized I was mute and talking forever, and I'm like, Jeff, why are you talking over me?
Oh, sorry.
No, it's totally fine. And I do want to plug one more time. If you are on Instagram, we're giving away a free feasibility study, $600 you don't need to spend. Go to Instagram, click on the giveaway post and follow the instructions, because we'll be drawing that next Wednesday. So entry is until the end of the day on Tuesday.
Cool.
And like Tim said, if you have specific questions specific to your property, or you think of something after this, make sure to shoot them an email.
Great.
Great. Thanks everyone for coming.
Yeah, thank y'all.
Good to see you guys.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
Bye.